call the roll. Being recorded. Okay, I'd like to call the roll. Dick Benka,
Here.
Ruth Ellen Fitch. Doesn't look like he's here. Jeff Rudolph. Was that Jeff?
Yep.
Sergio Modigliani, he's out of town. Janet
Here.
Sadaf Cosby,
Here.
Mariana Brega,
Here.
John Doggart. Okay, Cliff Brown is alternate.
See Cliff.
Jesse Hefter, his alternate. I'm sorry. Is Mariah here? Yes, okay.
I don't see Jeff Rudolph. If
I
No,
don't think Jeff can make it today.
yeah.
okay, so, and I'm here. So we should, we have a forum to start.
You do.
Pardon?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were asking.
So I'd like to start off by saying a few words before we get going. So we're entering the final 2 weeks of our process to determine whether to recommend an override to the select board. And if we do recommend an override, the amount, the type, and the arguments we will make to persuade the voters to approve it. We're going to accelerate our work, as you probably know, and we'll be meeting 2 times this week and possibly 4 times next week. For the final meeting on our override work on Friday the 13th. The tentative topics of those meetings have been provided to the committee, and the final agenda items will be posted before the meetings, for the public to follow along. The recommendations must be submitted to the select board on March 13, so it can be included in our packet for the select board meeting on Tuesday, March 17. The expectation is that the select board will debate the committee's recommendations on March 17 and March 24 and vote on March 24th on those recommendations. If there's any delay, we have what do you call it? We have a backup plan, and that is that we have until 11:59 p.m., I'm told, on March 31st to take our vote for an override to be placed on the ballot. So that's the schedule we have going forward. So we have a lot of work to pack into a relatively small number of meetings. So this is not a time for excessive and unnecessary verbosity. And you know who I'm talking to. I considered putting a time limit on people, but instead we're putting a time limit on the topics of discussion and expect that everyone will be respectful of other members and they will not dominate the time. If not, I'll just interrupt you so others can have an opportunity to speak. So, we have very little time. We got to pack a lot of stuff in here. So let's really cooperate on that. And I also urge members of the committee, of course you're going to, but let me just say it again, to make sure you read and study the parts of the report that we will be discussing before each meeting, and come prepared with corrections, concise suggestions for improvement, or items with which you disagree. And I suggest that any disagreements be written out so that if necessary, we can include them in an addendum to the final report. So with that sort of introductory or orientation, I'd like to begin discussion and possible vote on the memo prepared by Dick Benka on capacity to pay report, or size of the override and capacity to pay. So Dick, are you going to present that?
Yes, and I will, following your guidance, try to be very short and concise in the description of what I've done, with the assumption that...
Let me just add that we've given 20 minutes to this part of the...
30, sorry.
30 minutes? Okay, sorry. You got 10 extra.
With the assumption that people have looked at it. If they have not, the first 2 pages, 2.5 pages, basically in bullet form summarize what's in the report. And you could look at that now, pull it up on your computers. There is factual information in here. that is based largely on public data and looks at communities that the schools have designated as similar school communities. What you will see if you look at this report is that we have in Brookline had an increasing frequency in our operating overrides and very substantial debt exclusions, largely for the construction, renovation, expansion of the public schools. And those debt exclusions are now hitting our taxes. Excuse me. Those are now hitting our taxes. The Department of Revenue figures look at single-family homes. In Brookline, our dollar amount and our percentage amount has gone up at a much greater rate than the similar school communities. The assessor's data looks at the increases in taxes for different types of properties in Brookline, from condominiums, single family, 2s, 3s, and 4+. Taxes have gone up at a far faster rate than inflation. The section of the report also looks at the impact on individuals. And again, this is public data from the American Community Survey. For both owners and renters, a large percentage of both owners and renters are paying more than 35%, even larger amount, more than 30% of their house. Tax increases, as we know, can be passed on under the standard Boston area lease, can be passed on to renters. What surprised me was the impact on senior owners and also, I think, senior renters, both in terms of the existence of the increases and the magnitude. I had expected that senior owners, as opposed to other owners of property, would be less impacted by housing costs because their mortgages would be paid off. But actually, they are a greater percentage of senior owners are paying more than 30% of their household income for housing costs. Almost 50%, 49.9% of senior renters are paying more than 30% of their household incomes for housing costs. So there is already, with the existing costs, existing tax increases that we've seen to this point, a significant impact on individuals. That brings me to the thought that an override might fail if we recommend everything that's been asked for. If we recommended everything that has been asked for, using the most recent information from the schools, there'd be an 8.3% increase in fiscal year 27 and a 19.3% total increase at the end of the 3-year period, over the 3-year period in taxes. That would be a combination of increases that are already embedded, plus the override, with, frankly, the embedded increase is a large part of that. And I think that this committee should seriously consider whether we should roll the dice on that issue. I got some instruction from Stoneham, which was cited in the financial plan of the town. Stoneham used a tiered override. A large override failed. Then they came to the voters with a 2-level tiered override, a lower amount and a higher amount. The higher amount failed, the lower amount passed. And I think that is something that we should be seriously thinking of. Obviously, this is up to the select board, The report makes it clear it is not our decision. It is a select board decision. I do offer one option, which focuses on two issues that have already been deemed by this committee to be unsustainable. And I suggest the possibility of a tiered override that would get voter feedback on those issues. One is the 83% health insurance contribution, and the other is the salary structure with steps, which leads to wage increases substantially greater than inflation and the nominal COLA increase. So that is what is in the report. I think ultimately what this committee does, I would recommend a tiered override. I suggested one way to approach it, focusing on issues that are really the budget busters, including particularly the health insurance issue. If we don't do something about that, frankly, it is embedded in the override asks of both the town and the schools. That 83% is assumed to be something that will continue into the future. I think it is something we have to seriously address. And ultimately, we would have to address priorities on the town and the school side for any tiers as we go forward, unless we do something along these lines. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. I don't see any hand raised.
Trying. Here we go.
Okay,
So, Dick, it's a really thorough report. I agree with you. It's going to be extremely hard, I think, to pass any override. I actually talked to a neighbor who's young, because usually I only talk to seniors. And someone who, like most in the town, are not at all involved. I said, are you aware that there's this potential tax increase, that your taxes are going to go up at least 5% just for what's already on the table? And the cuts would be severe. It would affect schools, fire, whatever. She said, I can't afford to stay here. And she's, I believe, a medical resident, unless there's another tier over that before she's done with her education. And she just said, our condo fees went up, and this is another one. I just can't afford to stay. It doesn't matter what's in there. I would vote no. So we need to keep that in mind. I am concerned about tiering related to, as I expressed before, changing that 83%, because the 83% is a given until it's changed. So if you put on the override, we're reducing the amount by whatever, $3 million, I think was one of the figures. You have to say, if that's what you go for, if we can't negotiate it, then we will have to cut other parts of the budget, both town and school. So it has to, in my mind, be a fully disclosed choice that you're making, because otherwise I'm going to vote for this and expecting that's going to happen. I wish we could do it on our own. We can't. As to the steps, it depends on how big they are. I know that on the town side, one of the issues that fell off the priority list for Chaz is that the laborers in DPW, there are no steps at all. So no matter how much experience you have, you make the same wage. You're hired in, let's say $15, you get a 3% raise, whatever that comes to. But that's anybody else hired in after you. So you could be there for 10 years and the guy coming in the first year. So that would have to be addressed. But I think those are issues we need to address. I just strongly feel that we can't base tiering on something that we can't promise. That's my comment. But thank you for doing this. It's a lot of hard work.
thank you. Mariah?
Thank you. I agree with Janet about the concern about the tier based on health insurance that we can't control. And I wonder, is Chaz, you're in the room, right? Can you, Okay, do you mind just speaking to that a little bit about like where you see the feasibility of that is before I continue on my other remarks?
Yeah, so we talked about this last night at the schools subcommittee hearing meeting. And yes, I think the fundamental issue here is because of the way that we got into the GIC, it is going to take the consent of large portion of the collective bargaining units in order to do something about this. With that said, both the superintendent and I are committed to doing this. We want to make it happen. But in order to get the buy-in from the bargaining units, we're going to have to give them something. And so it's not a given that the savings that might accrue from us dropping the percentages will necessarily flow directly back into the general fund to be obligated more generally. They're going to have to go towards some sort of, you know, they're going to have to go towards the next collective bargaining agreements in some way, shape, or form. And we've acknowledged that and we're working towards that, but we will not get something for nothing. They have no incentive to move off of this. Now, you could argue theoretically, all right, well, you could play hardball, right? You could say, you could go into these conversations and say to the unions, you will accept this, or there will be less. And I think if we were to try that, they would take the fight to town meeting. And the fight on the floor of town meeting would be, how dare you cut police, firefighters, teachers, etc. You should be cutting somewhere else. And that somewhere else doesn't really exist per se, but it would be a really nasty battle, I think, to try and make up those numbers elsewhere. If we were in a position where we were able to say, if we were in a position where we said, hey, you know, you've got to take this, or the result is we'll lay people off. You know, we're already at a point where we've made these adjustments in the size of our staff that it would be self-defeating potentially to do more than what we proposed in a no override scenario. And you know, I just think that, long story short here, right, that it goes back to the principle that Janet outlined, which is, I don't think we can budget for something that is not a certainty. With that said, I think Dick's comment last night was very prescient about this, which is, we can't keep on, the alternative is to assume that we're just going to keep on going on like we're going on, even though we all know this is unsustainable. And I think the only way we can thread that needle is to say, we all agree that it's not sustainable. And we are all working toward, and the superintendent and I have made a commitment to working towards changing this over this 3-year period. Our goal here, and I have said this to the bargaining team, and to everybody involved in this, is to change this by FY29 in a way that makes this sustainable. And that's going to take a lot of negotiation and effort and work on that front. And while we're doing that, I don't think it makes sense to price it into the budget. But I will say that our goal is to shift this number, because this number is not sustainable. So Dick is right. This is not something that we should be treating as a given going forward. But I also think Janet is right, that we can't make the assumption that it's going to go away, because we have to get there. And I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of what the give back has to be to the bargaining units to get out of it.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to comment on in terms of capacity to pay, I wanted to actually just quote from something that Dave Gayshock wrote to the TMMA, because it's about the tax rates and the rise in wealth. And I'll just make 2 points, which is, I'll just quote 2 things. One is Brookline's FY26 residential property rate of $10.24 per $1,000 of value is actually slightly lower than the same rate was a decade ago in FY 2016, which was $10.42. And so the increase in tax rates for the average single family home that corresponds to an increase in property value of approximately $1 million. And obviously the $1 million is not liquid income, but it does correspond to wealth. and many multipliers of wealth above and beyond the taxes that are associated with that. And so I think while we should be talking about all of the things that Dick mentioned, we should also be talking about the associated increase in home values that correspond to that, and acknowledge that there are tools that the town has to allow people to access that, or that they have through private means to access that as well. And it's important to contextualize both sides of that conversation. The last thing I would want to talk about is the tiers, and whether we can approach the tiers to be able to have, for example, the option that would allow for funding of the 3-year override in 2 years as the lower tier, and then fully funding the 3-year override over 3 years as the second tier.
Okay, anyone other than Janice who's already spoken?
Could
Is
I,
it possible to have Chaz or someone talk about the 2 and 3, the idea that I just floated too?
Yeah, can we, can we come back to that? I have some numbers on that, but I wanna make sure that the conversation doesn't, I don't wanna suck up the conversation.
Janet?
So to Mariah's point, for seniors particularly, that growth in the value of the property has not been met by a growth in their income because they've already stopped working and their income is limited. And I will say it's not, gee, all poor seniors, because it really depends on where your limits landed. We have some people who are very well off in retirement and some who are struggling. So I'm not sure. I know for myself, I own my condo outright. I bought it outright. So I have benefited from not having a mortgage for the full time that I've lived in Brookline. It allowed me to save more than I could have otherwise for my retirement. And I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable because I don't buy a lot of stuff. And that has something to do with it. But renters, if I were to say, I don't want to live here anymore, I want to downsize. Well, I downsized from my home when I moved and bought my condo. There's no place I could go in Brookline. If I sell my unit, a lot of what I make would earn goes to taxes, goes to income taxes. And the rents now would triple what I'm currently paying, because I've looked at that. I have friends who've moved into senior housing on one level or another, and even the supported senior housing, you're paying $2,500, $3,000. As to renters, I live in a condo. Half the units are rental units, and the owners would be passing those rents on. So it's not just, the 2 and 3 family homes that Dick talked about, but condos in general. A lot of the owners have moved out and they're renting that property. And in my building, most of those owners don't get a vote because they've moved out of Brookline. They bought their units for their kids who were going to school. I can walk to all the schools just about in the area. And then the kids graduate and they retain it as a rental unit. And so they don't get to vote. And so it wouldn't bother them because the whole thing could just be slopped over to their tenants, who are the young people moving in we'd want to have here. I'm done.
Yeah, and let's try to avoid what is sort of anecdotal information. Dick?
yeah, thank you. I think that psychologically, a tiered override would allow something to pass. I think if you see one large number, you may well, I'm not George Gallup, so I don't know exactly what would happen, but I do think that offering a tiered override would make it likely that the lower amount would pass. If you just offered a single high amount, I don't think that is the case. So as the select board approaches this, I do think you should look at a tier structure. And both the town and the schools need to find priorities for those tiers. Whether you would adopt something along the lines that I suggest, or you just say, look, a lower tier would give you this, a higher tier would give you that. It is important on the town and the school side to prioritize the tiers. With regard to the tax rate argument, sure, the rates are about the same or lower, but as Janet said, that's not, that doesn't translate to income. And frankly, the growth in the value of homes, this may be a comment that somebody who is working, like Dave Gayshok can say, but for a senior who is approaching the possibility of senior housing or assisted living, that home is their nest egg. That's their retirement nest egg. And I think you have to be sensitive to that. So
Okay.
with that,
Thank you. So that,
Yeah, thank you. So I want to say thank you to Dick for putting together the document. I thought it was it was really helpful. I thought the idea of putting the the health insurance on the ballot was an interesting one. I think there was a question about viability that everybody talked about. I agree overall with the idea of tiers. I think putting one number on the ballot is very risky. I understand why we got to that number. And I understand that without that number, programs would be cut. I understand that also. It's an incredibly difficult situation, and I think we all have a good appreciation for that. And also, I believe we need to find a way to put a tiered question on the ballot, because I think it is too high risk for our schools, for our town services, to have just one number that is not going to be supported by the voters. So that's my wherever we land on this, I think the tiers are the right path to get there. And I'm interested in hearing the Chaz's perspective on the tiers that Mariah alluded to as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to share my screen, and this is so not. I don't think any of you have seen this document. I've been working on this based on these conversations that we've been having and trying to come up with a solution that, as best as possible, threads the needle between all the considerations that Dick has been raising, and that you all have been raising, and that members of the select board have been raising. If we were to tier and override, what would it look? What would it look like, and what would happen? This is one way you could think about doing it. Share my screen here. I'll make this bigger. I'm sorry. You can see at the bottom of the screen the takeaway. Here are your three proposed tiers. Tier one, the lowest tier, is 16.2 million. Tier two is 19.6 million. Tier three is the full ask, the full amount, 24 million. And you can see it is structured more like a quote unquote traditional Brookline override, at least on the school side, in that the money is phased in over time on the school side. And so the hit to the levy in any given year is less. It still puts that levy number in the first year at 8.3% all in. But remember, even with no override, it's going up by 5%. So I understand that sticker shock is a concern here in terms of a 1 year bill increase, but your 1 year bill increase in FY27 is going to be high. It's going to be high no matter what. It's baked in. And so you have to think about balancing that out. But yes, if the current asks held and everything was kept the same, then the total override number would be, mere dollars under $24 million. A total 3 year levy increase when you factor in Prop 2.5 and debt exclusions of 18.51%. In comparison to a no override scenario, that number would go up by approximately 11.3%. That's our projection anyway for FY28 and 29 in terms of growth. The benefits to this obviously is that the levy doesn't go up as much in any one given year, except for FY27. The drawback is that sticker shock right there. The $24 million is almost $10 million more than any override. No, I'm sorry. It's about $9 million more than any override that's ever been proposed, and about $12 million more, $11 million more than any override that's ever passed in Massachusetts. So you're talking about a huge number. and a psychological barrier. The conversation that I continue to, the refrain that I continue to hear from members of the public, members of this committee is, if you don't put a 1 in front of it, it's not going to pass. So this is your tier 3, everything under the sun option. Everyone in a way that's phased in to moderate the tax impact to the voter. Tier 2 is structured the same, is structured differently. It's structured, and tier 2 and tier 1 are both structured differently. They're structured under the assumption that you take all the money in year 1 and start a reserve fund to balance it out, to balance out the ask. This reduces the overall total levy increase, and it creates a path forward for the town and the schools to sort of bridge themselves out into FY30 and beyond. The principal difference between tier 2, that's 19.6 million, and tier 1, you can see here these angry red numbers at the end of tier 1, is that tier 2, if we were to budget 19.6 million, you can see the town ask actually goes up slightly. If we were going to ask for this much money, I would ask for more money on the town side to, among other things, shore up our resources and shore up the roads, which is a conversation we had this morning. But it wouldn't be up by much. You would then take all of that money in year 1. You would tax all of that money in year 1. So you would see a significant levy increase in FY27, an 11% levy increase. But you would take that money and you would bank it. You would put anything that you did not spend into a reserve fund. And that reserve fund on the school, this is the school's reserve fund. The town reserve fund calculation I can get to you, but I was focused primarily on the school side because right now the town's side balances out. And what I've been working on is trying to get the school side to balance out. So you have a reserve fund balance here, which you then continue to bank. Again, because you have capacity in the levy, the projected increase in spending on the school side is covered by that additional levy capacity. You can put more money away in your reserve fund. Your reserve fund climbs to around $11 million. In FY29, you don't have enough levy capacity left to cover the projected school increase, which is a large one. However, you have $5.1 million in your reserve fund, and your reserve fund then balances out to $6 million. Why is this important? Why is that $6 million number important? Because in FY30 is kind of the bridge year in all of this, the hinge year. We are not projected to satisfy our pension obligations until FY31. And so while the contribution on pensions will go down in FY30, it will not go down enough to cover the school's projected gap. The schools are projecting $6 million increases in their costs for the entirety of their kind of 5-year, their out years, their 5-year out years. So FY30, FY31. So if you have enough of a reserve in FY30 to cover that with this override, that gets you there. And you're not then facing a financial cliff on the school side in FY30 as you await the sort of benefits, projected potential benefits that we would see in FY31 with the retirement of the outstanding pension liability, with the last payment on the Alston settlement will come in FY32. Debt as a percentage of revenue will continue to decrease. The financial picture looks better the further you get into the 30s. So this number gets you through FY30 without putting the schools on a cliff. Tier 1 has the attractive, is designed to keep any potential levy increase below 10%. That's the name of the game. And the break even on this is 16.2 million. That's what would get you below a 10% levy increase in FY27. You can see here, however, that that is not sufficient to cover the school's costs in FY29. So what is sufficient to cover the school's costs through FY29? It's actually 17 million. And I can put this in and you can see how the magic works. All of a sudden that number turns black. The schools are in the black at least through FY29. The problem here, as you know, is that then you are $12 million in the hole for FY30. Because you have paid for all of this increase in your expenses with a reserve fund transfer. And in FY30, you're going to go up by an additional $6 million. So you're looking at another roughly $12 million gap to fill in FY30. And it almost certainly sets you up for a conversation about another override. Another override with a substantial cliff to face, with not a lot of good options left for cutting, et cetera. So you would be mortgaging the future in a lot of ways in order to pay for the present by dropping this to right now what I have, 17 million is the break even. The really, that's the duck that says we spent half an hour on this. But I'll pause.
To wrap up.
Yeah. That's a projection for how you might do 3 tiers. But that's only one way of thinking about it. But I've been trying to solve the problem of how do you fund what you need to fund for the next 3 years, given that the schools in town have already made cuts, significant cuts, but also maintain fiscal stability and fiscal responsibility. So this is a preliminary draft. I just finished it this morning. I will send it to the committee. You should feel free to tinker around with it and make alternate proposals.
Great, thank you. Did you take the
Yeah, sorry.
thing down? Okay, Dick?
Very quickly, I was trying to figure out the difference between.
Hold on. We're going over 30 minutes, so just bear that in mind.
Yep, this is 1 minute, 2 minutes. I was trying to figure out the difference between the 18.51% and my 19.3%. And I think the difference may largely be due, Chaz, to the fact that I included the CPA, and I don't know that your numbers included the CPA.
Are correct. Yeah, sorry, that's right.
Okay. Number 2, the current structure would have an 8.3% increase in next year in fiscal year 27. A couple of the options that you presented would be 10.99% and 9.97%,
Yeah.
which would be even more daunting in the first year. And I would be very concerned about that in terms of voter acceptability.
Yeah.
And finally, my last point, again, this assumes that the 83% contribution in the current salary structure carry forward. And that is a given that we've all decided is unsustainable. Thank you.
Chaz, are you able to put the spreadsheet back up? Bernard, I know we're a little bit over, but Cliff isn't here, and so I'm not sure we'll get to his document, or we can review his document, but if there are questions, unfortunately, we won't
So
answer them. So just so you know. So on tier 2, if you could take a move to that tab, I want to make sure I understand the newly available property tax revenue with the override. So this is basically the override value, in other words, above and beyond what is currently Cliff, good timing. So what is available to levy with Prop 2.5, right? So what is the actual tax? How does the taxpayer experience this, right? So they'll have a spike in 2027, and then will it start to go down, or that delta is made up for with the increase in Prop 2.5 revenue? I think it's important to understand for me, like what that looks like as a taxpayer, because if you're going sort of up and down, it feels less predictable and it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah. So really what you're looking at here, this is a rough calculation. I'm not compounding it, for example, but again, the 3-year levy increase from the FY26 numbers would be 17%. So it's a little bit smaller than before, but not much. But again, it would be, right, to Dick's point, there would be this sort of shock in year 1, and then your year 2 numbers would be no override numbers. It would be 3%, 3.1% and 3.1%. That still gives you a total 3-year levy increase of 17%, slightly lower than the ask for everything and phase it in number. But it would that's basically where you would get to. That's how you get there.
okay, take the thing down. So
Yeah.
you see. Okay, so let's move on to our next topic, which is the school subcommittee reports. who's gonna start off there?
Yeah, I can start, and we have Cliff as well. I just want to make sure that, I mean, the capacity pay question is important. I think we can try to adapt a little bit within our content. I just wanted to see if there were any other, well, Bernard, I know you're running the meeting. I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of our time just to make sure that everybody has their thoughts out on the table, and we'll adjust. So I
Yeah,
want to pop that up.
I think that's appropriate. May mean that we go over our 2 hours, so, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
we'll do our best to stay within the timeline.
So I would just, to Dick's point, see if Chaz can try to factor in some sense of what would happen if in the out years you were able to negotiate down the health insurance contribution, or maybe even think of what it might mean in 2030, which is the hinge year, so that we have some sense of what's going on. And then if we went with this model and took everything and set up the sustainability fund, it seems to me our sales point would be it's going to hurt a lot now, but you won't have to do it again in the next couple of years. But I'm not sure that sells because it's the now that people really focus on.
and the hurt continues, just doesn't rise.
Right.
It goes to that.
Yeah, I was just going to add that going back to Dick's document, and I'd share this feedback with Dick as well. I think the salaries are obviously on the school side 87.5% of the overall budget, so it's an important consideration, and they're growing higher than our revenue increase is growing year over year. And one of the things that wanted to make sure that I was able to say is that while managing that and the mix of the different increases that different people get is important, we also need to consider making sure that people want to come to the district. And so we're paying sufficiently for people to be able to, our teachers to want to come to the district and to be able to be compensated in a way that, that is competitive with other districts from an increase standpoint. We know that our compensation right now is above the median with comparable districts, but that's sort of a point in time versus, just making sure that over time we continue to maintain that. Other numbers will move as well. So it's something for us to consider to the extent that we continue to go down that path, which I'm not sure we are suggesting that at this point, but it is an important consideration to hire and retain strong talent.
Okay, let's move on to the school subcommittee report.
Okay. So the first one on the list actually is the non-residential special education one, Dick. So over to you again.
Yes, this is very, very quick. This was discussed at 2 meetings ago, and there was a question that arose when I think Dr. Wong said that there was a $230,000 Metco grant to go towards special education, and Mariah Nabrega indicated that the school committee had not seen that. As it turns out, they were both right. As of 2/25, or 2/23, which was the last email that I got, the $230,000 grant had been tentatively approved, but had not yet been finally approved at the state level. So what I've done to address this issue is just added the clause that as of that date, 2/25, there was tentative approval for a grant in the amount of, I think, $236,198, but it had not yet been finally approved to address the concerns that were raised at that meeting. And with that, I would ask that the report be approved.
Okay, any further comment on that?
No, but I move to approve the report.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? We go down the list. Dick Pinker,
Yes.
Janet Gelbart,
yes.
Sadat Kazi,
Yes.
Mariah Nabrega,
Can't vote.
Mariah,
I'm not a voting member, Bernard, because
I'm
I'm on
sorry.
school committee.
sorry. Um, who's for the advisory committee? Cliff Brown, I think, is here.
Yeah,
The-
yes,
So that approves the subcommittee report on non-residential special education costs. What's next?
All right, so the next one is the town school financial model recommendation. This was on the docket for last week, and we didn't get to it because we ran out of time. The document hasn't changed, so for people who read it for last week, it's the same document. Essentially, this is just as a recap. This was really summarizing what we recommend as the next steps with respect to the town school financial model work that was started last spring that we didn't complete. The overall recommendation is that we take a look at a series of things that are enumerated in the document. I don't want to recap it. I'm hoping people read it. And that be taken up as a follow-up study committee. It could be, an extension of a subset of this group or the group that was assembled last May or so to tackle this and kind of fizzled. But the request is that the select board do a follow-up study because these are critical things to look at, and we simply didn't have the time to actually fully run this to ground and take a look at everything that needed to be evaluated.
Okay, any further discussion? Janet?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize, I think it's an excellent report, especially the detail on the building side. But I want to emphasize how important it is to look at where you put benefits because, and this hit me in the face the first time when I read Chaz's override proposal in his budget, is that with the health benefits above the line, the schools perceive that they're losing revenue because it leaves less to be split 60-40. So they're saying we only got 1.4% over last year. You've done something to our allocation. And what's been done to the allocation is how much has to come out before that allocation is made. So I think it's important if you took $100,000 away from revenue and put it in expense, again, then the schools would have to deal with the full cost of every hire instead of just the salary cost because the rest came out of their revenue and it's not really revenue, it is an expense. So I would just emphasize how much that needs to get looked at and congratulate you on a very good job.
All right, thank you. Yes, so that's definitely in the report to take a look at, and it would, the change would be made. If that change were to be made, obviously would be made for both the schools and the town side.
Right, right.
And I also wanted to mention that Carol Levin, who authored the appendix on the buildings, is on the call to the extent that people have questions specifically on that part of the document, and has agreed generously to answer any of those questions. So thank you, Carol, for being here. All right. Any other questions or comments on the document or about the recommendation as well?
I would just, this is to some extent a work in progress at this point. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, the recommendation is, hey, we need to continue to study it and hear the considerations and the areas we think need to be tackled, essentially. So.
Right. And a few things need to get fleshed out here as well.
Okay, anyone want to move approval?
I'll move that.
Any further discussion?
Well, I would vote for it as is with the understanding that there are sections that that the school subcommittee has not yet completed. Is that correct, Sadaf?
No, this is the town school financial model where, yes,
never mind.
You're talking about the CLA report, so we'll get to that in a minute.
No, okay, no, I was focusing on the last couple of issues under the study issue. For example, the issue of contract compliance and so forth.
On the town school financial model.
Right.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Let me, I was going to pull the document
Yeah,
up as well.
that would be helpful.
Tell you what, let me withdraw that comment. Let's go ahead and vote it. And
All right, so Cliff moved. Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, Dick Banker,
I'm going to abstain.
Janet Gelbart,
aye.
Sadat Kazmi,
Yes.
Cliff Brown.
Yes.
Okay, 3-1, or 3-0-1. That passes. Okay, next item.
All right, the next item is the CLA report response. So I included both the summary of where we are in terms of looking at the follow-ups to the recommendations that were made by the CLA report. We're not looking for a vote on this. This was mostly intended to give this group an update on the work that's been done, where this stands. There were a couple of additional documents that are supporting documents, as well as a bunch of links in the appendices. If you look at the table, there are a couple of items that still need to be confirmed. I did receive some information from the schools a day or two ago that I need to review to see if that addresses these questions. So the two outstanding things that we're looking to validate is around the written contracts and a bid for all purchases and services over $100,000, as well as sending an employee to MCPPO training. And then the last bit is something that is at the end of the document, which is about the funding for the CLA report follow-up. So CLA had agreed to come back and do the work. There's a question about how that would be funded. There has been a request made to the advisory committee from the select board for a reserve fund transfer. That is going to be reviewed tonight at the advisory committee meeting. And so my hope is that once we have those two pieces completed, we can bring this report back to the full committee and have it voted as a recommendation, which will entail the follow-up done by CLA to close this out.
Great, thank you.
Any questions or comments about the work that's been done?
Okay, let's move on to the next. No vote on that, so let's move on to the next item.
All right, the next one.
Anyone know what that is?
Forecast?
Yes. Oh, I apologize. We skipped your forecast line item. Sorry, Cliff.
That's okay. And my apologies to everyone. I had to go to the dentist and there was only a slot that overlapped with this meeting, so that's why I was late. So the forecast document is something that the school subcommittee voted. It really just makes a recommendation that the school committee should have a policy of retaining a third party every 2 or 3 years, certainly not more than 3 years, to do a forecast that includes an economic and demographic outlook, the way Cropper-McGibbon has done it in the past. The memo highlights the fact that what the schools have been using for the last couple of years is accurate with respect to sort of like a 1-year outlook, but it really doesn't have the capability of looking beyond 1 year with any degree of substantial accuracy. So this is really sort of like a supplement, a recommendation on a supplement to what the schools have been doing year to year for the last couple of years. I'm happy to answer any questions about the specifics of the information in the document. I think it's pretty straightforward, though.
Any discussion or questions? If you want to vote?
Sure, I'll move it.
Second,
Vote. I'm sorry, who said something?
I did as well as Sadaf, so you've got seconds and thirds.
Okay. All in favor? of the forecast report, Dick Benka,
Aye.
Janet Gelbar,
Aye.
Suzanne Casmi,
Aye.
and Cliff Brown.
Aye.
And may I change my vote on the financial model from an abstention to a yes, to an aye? I checked the document and it was my mistake. So
I think that it's allowed.
thank you.
Nicole, are you taking note? I assume that's a yes.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Nicole.
Okay, the next item. What do you have next to that?
So we're done from the school side. We will present the BEEP report tomorrow. Jeff Rudolph couldn't be here today. So unfortunately that has to be covered tomorrow. We're done with our section. I told you we would catch up. We're not.
Actually, we are way ahead of schedule, and we can go back and continue any discussion on capacity to pay.
There's actually an executive summary from the town subcommittee that was shared today. Is that something, let's see, Janet and John are here. I don't see Jesse or John Doggett. Do we want to talk about that? That might.
I'm happy to. I thought you were also going to get the document as it stands now. A lot of it is, as you saw before, an elaboration of how we got here, an explanation of the things hitting the budget. And we are presenting a document which has more or less a placeholder in it. So the full document says, makes an adjustment to what's in DPW, replacing the sustainability positions and the tree canopy horticultural positions with road work. We really feel it's important to keep putting money into road repair and maintenance. It is a key issue for the town. So it's something we feel might help sell the document. And John, when he edited it, stuck it in DPW as the easy way to just say, well, here's an amount of money and let's do this. But we're still waiting for some clarification, some recommendations from the town as to how we can include it. Should we ask for more money? Should it be in a better place? I'm very concerned about taking away the sustainability positions because we've already voted that we want solar and it won't go forward. And that seems to be a way to save money, lots of money going forward. So you can read the document, I would say, with that caveat when you get to that part. We're still working on it, but we felt it was very important to get something out to the committee. And after you've had a chance to look at it, maybe we can have a better discussion tomorrow. I don't know if John has anything to add.
Yes. First of all, when you said John, I'm pretty sure you were referring to John Doggett.
No, he's not here. He's not here.
No, but you said John when he.
Oh,
was
I'm sorry.
doing-
Yes, it was John Doggett who
Yeah.
did the
And
amendments.
the only reason I bring that up is because, as Janet said, there is one aspect of things that we did not sort of come to final conclusions on, and that is as she described. Also, I'm just looking it up right now. I thought I was actually maybe getting ahead of things by at the last minute, since we had voted on our report and on the executive summary. I thought, why not go ahead and put it in the agenda of this meeting, even though I don't believe we are scheduled for discussion of this until tomorrow. This was not intended to prompt a discussion at today's meeting. And I think it best be, we stick with the plan, which is, I see we are on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. But you'll be getting the report as a whole, in addition to this executive summary that has already been shown to you. And I strongly urge people to take a close look at it and to keep in mind that there's a key issue that we do not address in that report, and that is, how to allocate the spending in the Department of Public Works. And, I would say too that where the committee as a whole is concerned, this committee is concerned, the discussion that Dick has prompted is going to be very, very crucial, because it's all well and good for us to validate what are the shortfalls in terms of the ongoing operations that would be at risk if there was not some kind of substantial amount of override monies approved by the voters. But if we're not paying attention to capacity to pay, we could either ask for more than the voters are going to, be willing to give us, or we would fall short in terms of having a number that we can validate as being a mutual sharing of sacrifice. In other words, voters are going to have to pay more than they are comfortable paying. But at the same time, town and school operations are going to really bear down on some of these long-term issues in their budgets and do some very, very serious negotiating when it comes to the contracts that are negotiated for town employees, because pretty much all of our ongoing fixed cost pressures that are beyond inflation come as a result of those negotiated contracts.
I also meant to point out that we have not yet had a discussion of whether or not we think it should be lump sum establishing a stabilization fund. The report as it stands now does break out the percentages of increase for the recommended amount from the town of 5.31. John Doggett has just joined us. I don't know, John, they were asking us about our report. And I pointed out that we are still toying with this idea of how to include roads. So I don't know if you have anything else to add about what we've done.
No, I apologize for being late. My plumber has,
By the way,
we've got plumbing problems.
hold on, John.
Hello?
Remember, this is not on the agenda. So I think this should be presented as providing information to us for a discussion tomorrow.
Okay, very good. I think probably, I suspect Janice has indicated where we are and where we need to be, and we've got to resolve the issue of how roads and sidewalks and road improvements are included.
Great. Okay, that's the end of our agenda. As I said earlier, if you want, we can go back and complete our discussion of the capacity to pay report. Or we can just end the meeting.
Before we end the meeting, well, let's let people answer that question first, and then I had a question about tomorrow as well.
So we want to have that discussion or in the meeting after that?
I mean, I have questions.
Mariah has her hand up.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm wondering if we could spend a little bit more time talking about the 3 tiers with the spreadsheet, because I know we rushed through that very quickly in the interest of time, but since we have more time, is it possible to go back to it and just understand it a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that.
I suggest the same thing, so thank you.
Okay. Oh, is that what you said too? Sorry.
I didn't, I was going to, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, but what do other people think? Let's do it. Okay, so.
Chaz, could you explain, one question I had was on the, I'm gonna get the numbers wrong. The tier 1.
Yeah,
So on tier 1, and maybe it's just because the dollars haven't, maybe it's because this doesn't include the town yet, but at the end of year 3 in tier 1, is this town going negative or just the schools?
just the schools, the town, 531 is kind of the magic number for the town to balance out. We get there just barely, in FY 29.
So in a reduced situation here, why are we only asking the schools to go negative and not the town?
So what I would like to have happen here is I would like to have something more akin to this happen. The reason why I put 16.2 there is to demonstrate what gets you below a 10% total levy increase. Although as Dick pointed out, that does not include CPA, that just sits off to the side there. But it is something that people feel, and so we need to talk about it. What I'm hopeful is going to happen is that between, the folks may know the GIC has voted preliminarily to withdraw coverage for GLP-1 drugs, but they have also deferred consideration at the governor's request of other things that would have an impact on our healthcare costs, like increasing copays and so forth, and total out-of-pocket caps. So we don't know where they're going to wind up. We don't think it's going to move the needle significantly, but it might move the needle just enough to get us to a point where 16.2 would break even for the schools. So I wanted to make the point currently that 16.2 leaves the schools in a hole. 16, or would require, but again, I don't have a way to get the town down further, $800,000 further to cover the school's ask at that juncture. But I do think that between the House Ways and Means budget and whatever the GIC number is, that we will see some movement, and that may be enough to get us to a point where 16.2 is viable. So I wanted to demonstrate how you get under that 10% number. But realistically, for folks watching, the current break-even number for town and schools alike is 17 million.
Can I ask two follow-up questions? One is, do you have an ETA for the revised GLP calculations?
We're waiting. They have to take a formal vote later this week. Once they do that, we'll be able to run those numbers and get to where we are.
And then if you revert this to 16.2,
Yeah.
just is the negative 2 million, is that a hit to the budget in FY 29, or is that the negative that carries to FY 30?
That is the hit to the budget in FY 29.
Okay.
So FY 30, you'd be looking.
I would
more-
just point out that the schools have also been doing all of the work to cut and cut and cut. And as you said, sort of 5.3 is the bottom line. And we have really, if we are not there, we are very, very, very close to
Yes.
the bottom. While it is already a reduced service budget, just like it is on the town, the PSB budget is also, even with these numbers, a reduced service budget. So an additional 2.2 million or 2 point anything million is going to be it will be a significant cut and a further reduction. We really can't accommodate that either.
Like I said,
I think from my perspective, this number would need to be looked at across the town and the schools. If we come up with an override ask of 16.2, the responsible thing to do is for us to look at everything holistically. And not to say, well, the schools are just going to be in a hole. Again, if we land on this scenario, but that the towns are not going to, there's going to be no implication to the town side on it. So I guess riffing off of what you said, Mariah, but making a slightly different point.
May I ask, Mariah, since you said that you're working it down, and I know that you are, where are you now? Because the only number I've seen is that 19 whatever.
There was an additional 1.3 million in cuts made last week. And there will be, I think, some small adjustments made tomorrow, as well as the presentation of the impacts of the 28 and 29 cuts, because the presentation last Thursday focused on the FY 27 cuts of 5+ million, but not the subsequent cuts that would be made in 28 and 29 that are closer to 12 to $13 million additionally. And so the Thursday night, the last Thursday cuts focused on all the cuts that would be made out of the classroom, and next week will be, there's no out of the classroom left to spare. It'll be essentially class size increases, and so that would be the presentation. But again, there was another $1.3 million in cuts made last week, and there may be some slight adjustments. Again, they always are refining the budget as, more information comes out.
Right, so your number now with that, just roughly, it was 19 point something, and now it sounds like it's 18 something, 17
Yeah,
something?
let me pull up the exact number so I have it exactly accurate for you, but it's 18.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't want to say the wrong number out loud, so let me get that.
I appreciate that, because that's the number they always remember.
Yes, exactly. Let me see where it is. Here it is. It is, where is it? Why does it still say 19.8? That can't be right.
That's all right, I can get it tomorrow. I just
Okay.
want to be able to keep track. Thank you.
Mariah,
Yes,
on,
sir.
on February 26th, it was 18,538,687. Is that
Thank
the most?
you. Yes, that sounds right.
Okay, thank you,
Oh,
Dick.
it's because I was looking at the wrong table. Yes, exactly. It's 18.5 million.
Okay, so that,
Yeah.
I think Dick had his hand up before me.
Yeah.
he spoke.
Um,
More to say?
I do have one other question. When you were flipping, Chaz, between 17 million and 16.2 million
Yeah,
in that line, that 800,000 led to, as I saw it, over a $2 million difference, or about a $2 million difference in cell E12. Yeah, there we go. And I'm trying to figure out intuitively how an $800,000 increase in the initial override leads to about a $2.5 million impact on the schools down in E12.
that's a great question. It's because the benefit of socking away more money in the first 2 years gets you a higher reserve fund balance. And then so it's not just it's so yeah, you get that extra $800,000 in the first year, and then you get this additional money in the second year, and then you have this $800,000 that you didn't.
Okay, so you're okay. Right. So you're getting okay. It's a $2.4 million increase
Right.
essentially over the three. Okay, I got it. And that
Okay.
explains it. Thank you.
So that,
So I wanted to understand, Chaz, you mentioned that in I think it's this scenario, there is a cliff on the school side.
Yes.
What is the cliff on the town side? I don't know if you said this before or not.
It's we squeak by. We are projecting that we will balance out in FY30, not by much, but we will.
Okay. All right, got it.
okay. Any further discussion? Questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I apologize because this might have been discussed while I was not here. So if it has, then just say so and I'll talk to someone offline. Looking at changing scenarios, I'm just kind of curious whether or not the potential changes in the GIC that are being discussed on Beacon Hill are factored into the revenue projections that go into all these scenarios, and whether or not the benefit of that is carrying through through the numbers. And I guess I'm also curious about if the revenue projections are being held static without any benefit like the GIC, and without any possible scenario analysis of, historically, how much have revenues sort of increased or decreased from a particular year when a forecast is made, when you go out, 2 or 3 years. So how accurate are they? Just curious.
Yeah, so these numbers do not take into account the GIC changes. And I think it's good that we don't, because as you heard, right, the GIC is getting cold feet. The governor personally intervened and said, don't you dare raise people's copays. And as a result, it looks like they're not going to. So we don't know what the benefit is going to be for us, or if the only substantive change they really make is cutting coverage for GLP-1 drugs. We also have to be careful about this, because one of the stated reasons why they are cutting this coverage is, at least to hear them talk about it, is strategic, because they basically want to force the, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk to the negotiating table and say, if you want us to cover these drugs, you have to charge less. As a result, there's a possibility that they will come back onto the GIC's coverage in FY28 or FY29, albeit at a reduced rate, which would then kick the numbers back up a little bit. So we want to be conservative in projecting what the GIC does and doesn't do here. Once we have the firm numbers from them, which again, hopefully we should have by the end of this week, we can run that projection and we can see what difference it makes. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, unfortunately. The other question you asked more broadly, do we take into account potential growth, revenue, how we expect revenues to grow and change in the out years? Yes, we do. We model that. We project modest growth in those out years. The reason why we don't project growth from specific projects is because we've kind of learned our lesson there. In the past, in the distant past, we have done things like say, well, we can expect in year X that this big project will come online and it will result in a Y benefit to the tax base. And inevitably, that deadline is missed. That project is canceled or put on hold. You look at what's happening at Waldorf Durgan. It doesn't provide.
Jonathan, that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question. Okay, my question was, not looking at any specific projects. I fully understand that. My question was, it really gets back to general scenario analysis that has been raised as a recommendation in the past. We project conservatively, and that's appropriate. I think from a scenario analysis, though, it's also appropriate to be looking at what the historical experience has been with regard to the different line items that make up the revenue projections. And I absolutely agree with you for like a development project that's, you can look at zero, you can look at, something, nothing. You can be very conservative, but I'm just wondering about the variance relative to forecast from a historical experiential basis, because what we get locked into here is single point projections. And, analytically, that's not the best way to look at things. You might come back and settle, that's fine, but it's still appropriate to have that information, at least for groups like this, to be able to look at, understand, and evaluate.
Sure, and we do that. I see Lincoln's got his hand up, and he can talk a little bit more about what.
Lincoln?
Yeah, no, in major revenue categories, when Melissa and I are looking at those projections, we absolutely include past experience in those projections. So, for example, motor vehicle excise, we're looking at 3-year past averages, 3-year past trends, 5-year past trends. So, and then modeling out, median figures for 3 years past to continue to be conservative, but looking at past experience. So real world past experience absolutely goes into major revenue categories in projections for those.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just while we're on this subject, Lincoln, for the purposes of this committee, what is your projection for revenue increase going forward?
I'm
the
sorry, I don't have
target?
it in front of me right now, but I will in one moment. Just a minute.
Thank you. Just thought as long as we were on this topic.
I can say the forecast projects overall revenue growth of 3.1% in both FY 28 and FY 29. That
Okay.
includes excluded debt.
Right. Well, excluded debt is not really a revenue increase.
No, but right,
Yeah.
it is additional money we're getting, but it's, as you point out, it's not really a revenue as we understand it.
And that 3.1% includes not just property tax, new growth, but also motor vehicle excise and the other topics?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that really is kind of the sustainability target without an override.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, anything else? Okay, unless no one objects, I'd like to end the meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. See you tomorrow.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.